Before American troops ever faced German forces in large numbers, many German officers had already formed firm conclusions about them. Based on pre-war intelligence, propaganda, and early assumptions, U.S. soldiers were seen as inexperienced civilians in uniform. German commanders believed that American troops lacked the discipline, combat experience, and psychological toughness required for modern warfare. In their view, no amount of equipment could replace the hardened mindset forged by years of European conflict. These beliefs were reinforced by early encounters. During the initial phases of a North African campaign in 1942, some American units performed poorly against veteran German formations. Battles such as Kasserine Pass were closely studied by German officers, who interpreted the results as proof that American soldiers would break under pressure. Reports described U.S. troops as hesitant, overly dependent on orders, and vulnerable to surprise. For a time, this assessment shaped German tactical confidence. However, this judgment failed to account for how quickly the American army adapted. After early defeats, training intensified, command structures were reformed, and inexperienced leaders were replaced. German intelligence underestimated the U.S. military's ability to learn from mistakes. Within months, American units returned to battle with improved coordination, stronger leadership, and greater confidence. By 1943 and 1944, German frontline reports told a different story. U.S. soldiers fought aggressively, used artillery and air support with deadly efficiency, and continued advancing despite heavy casualties. American replacements arrived quickly, allowing battered units to regroup and return to combat. German officers increasingly noted the mental resilience of U.S. troops, who adapted to combat stress faster than expected. What Germany had dismissed as weakness was, in fact, inexperience rapidly corrected by training, resources, and determination. One of Germany's most critical errors during World War II was its failure to grasp the true scale of American industrial power. Before and even after the United States entered the war, German planners viewed American factories as impressive but slow, believing that distance, labor shortages, and bureaucracy would limit production. They assumed that converting a civilian economy into a war machine would take years, time Germany believed it did not need to worry about. German intelligence reports tracked individual weapons, but missed the larger pattern. While Germany focused on building technically advanced tanks and aircraft in limited numbers, the United States embraced mass production. Assembly lines that once produced cars and refrigerators were rapidly transformed to build bombers, tanks, and trucks. By 1942, American shipyards were launching Liberty ships faster than German submarines could sink them. To German observers, such output seemed exaggerated or impossible. Even Hitler reportedly dismissed American production claims as propaganda. He believed American workers lacked the discipline to maintain sustained output and that labor disputes would cripple factories. This assumption ignored the unique strength of the U.S. economy, standardization, vast natural resources, and unmatched industrial organization. American factories operated around the clock, supported by an enormous workforce that included women on an unprecedented scale. As the war progressed, reality became impossible to deny. German soldiers encountered endless columns of American vehicles, fresh aircraft replacing losses within days, and supplies that never seemed to run out. Destroyed tanks were replaced not in months, but in weeks. German commanders began reporting that they were not fighting an army, but an entire continent turned into a factory. By the time Germany fully recognized the magnitude of American industrial power, the balance of the war had already shifted. When German soldiers first faced American forces in sustained combat, many were struck by the unexpected quality and consistency of U.S. weapons and equipment. Pre-war German assessments had assumed American arms would be inferior, mass-produced, simple, and lacking refinement. Instead, what they encountered on the battlefield challenged these assumptions and forced a rapid reassessment. The M1 Garand rifle became one of the most surprising discoveries. Unlike the bolt-action rifles used by most German infantry, the Garand's semi-automatic fire gave American soldiers a clear advantage in rate of fire. German after-action reports noted the volume of American small arms fire and often mistook it for machine gun positions. This superiority at the squad level made American infantry more dangerous than expected in close combat. The Sherman tank also generated mixed but powerful impressions. While not always superior in armor or firepower to German heavy tanks, the Sherman appeared everywhere. German tank crews reported destroying American armor only to encounter fresh vehicles shortly afterward. Reliability, ease of repair, and standardized parts allowed damaged Shermans to return to service quickly, a fact that frustrated German units accustomed to limited replacements. Equally unsettling was American logistical equipment. Long columns of trucks, fuel carriers, mobile kitchens, and engineering vehicles followed U.S. troops wherever they advanced. German soldiers noticed that American units were well-fed, well-equipped, and rarely short of ammunition. Wounded soldiers were evacuated quickly, and replacements arrived with alarming speed. These experiences reshaped German perceptions. American weapons were not designed for prestige or technical perfection. They were designed to work repeatedly, under all conditions. What Germany had dismissed as crude efficiency revealed itself as a powerful advantage. German military planning during World War II focused heavily on tactics, battlefield skill, and decisive engagements. What it consistently underestimated was logistics, the ability to move food, fuel, ammunition, and men across vast distances without interruption. Nowhere was this miscalculation more damaging than in Germany's assessment of the United States. German planners failed to understand that American strength did not rest solely in weapons or soldiers, but in the system that sustained them. Before U.S. troops arrived in Europe in large numbers, German intelligence assumed that supplying an overseas army would severely limit American operations. The Atlantic was viewed as a barrier that would slow deliveries and create shortages. Instead, the United States turned the ocean into a supply highway. Convoys crossed continuously, protected by escort ships and supported by an expanding port infrastructure in Britain and later in France. Once on the ground, American logistics stunned German observers. U.S. units rarely lacked food or ammunition. Fuel flowed in quantities the Germans could not match, allowing American armor and aircraft to operate at a tempo Germany struggled to counter. Mobile repair units kept vehicles running, while engineers rapidly built roads, bridges, and depots as the front advanced. German soldiers noted the contrast in daily life. While German units often rationed supplies and waited for deliveries that never arrived, American troops ate hot meals, received fresh equipment, and rotated units efficiently. Even during intense fighting, replacements and supplies appeared with remarkable speed. After the Normandy landings, the scale became undeniable. Endless truck convoys, later known as the Red Ball Express, kept Allied forces moving forward. German commanders increasingly reported that destroying American units meant little if their supply lines remained intact. For many German soldiers, their first true encounter with American power did not come on the battlefield, but in captivity. When German prisoners of war were transported to the United States, the journey itself challenged years of propaganda. Instead of ruins and deprivation, they arrived in a country operating at full capacity, far from exhausted by war. As POW trains crossed the American interior, German soldiers saw endless factories, rail yards, and warehouses stretching beyond the horizon. Industrial plants worked day and night, producing steel, vehicles, and machinery in quantities they had never imagined. Many prisoners later recalled their disbelief at the efficiency of American railroads, which moved freight and passengers with precision even during wartime. For men who had witnessed Germany's bombed cities and broken infrastructure, the contrast was overwhelming. Daily life in POW camps further eroded old beliefs. Prisoners received regular meals, medical care, and access to work programs. While conditions varied by camp, many German POWs were struck by the abundance of food and the absence of visible shortages. Some were assigned to farms or factories where they observed American productivity firsthand. The idea that such a society was soft or incapable of sustained war began to collapse. Conversations with American guards and civilians also played a role. Many POWs realized that the United States had not yet fully mobilized at the start of the war, and that what Germany had faced was only a fraction of America's potential. Letters sent home, though censored, often hinted at a reality far different from Nazi propaganda. By the time the war ended, thousands of German POWs returned home with a changed perspective. They had seen a nation at war without visible desperation, a society capable of immense production and stability. Their experience in captivity became quiet but powerful evidence of how deeply Germany had misjudged the United States. By the time German commanders fully recognized the true strength of the United States, the realization came under fire. The Normandy landings in June 1944 marked a turning point where long-held assumptions collapsed in the face of reality. German leaders had expected heavy losses among American troops during the invasion and believed that even a successful landing could be contained. Instead, they encountered an enemy that adapted with alarming speed. Despite initial confusion and costly resistance on beaches such as Omaha, American forces regrouped, reinforced, and pushed inland. German field reports soon described relentless artillery barrages, constant air support, and an overwhelming flow of men and equipment. What shocked German commanders was not just American firepower, but endurance. Attacks resumed day after day, even after severe casualties, leaving German defenses little time to recover. On the Western Front, the pattern repeated itself. In battles across France, Belgium, and later Germany itself, U.S. forces pressed forward with steady pressure. German commanders noted that American units withdrew when necessary, reorganized quickly, and returned stronger than before. Losses that would cripple German divisions were absorbed and replaced with remarkable efficiency. Attempts to halt the advance through counterattacks and elite formations failed. Fuel shortages, limited reserves, and constant Allied air attacks left German units isolated and exhausted. Reports from late 1944 increasingly acknowledged that the United States possessed not only superior resources, but also effective leadership and battlefield discipline. This realization came too late to alter the course of the war. Strategic misjudgments made years earlier had left Germany unprepared for an opponent capable of sustaining overwhelming force across an entire front. Germany's failure to accurately assess the United States had consequences far beyond individual battles. It shaped grand strategy, resource allocation, and long-term planning in ways that ultimately weakened the German war effort. By viewing America as a secondary threat, German leadership made decisions that assumed time was on their side, an assumption that proved disastrously wrong. Believing that the United States would struggle to project power across the Atlantic, Germany prioritized short-term victories in Europe rather than preparing for a prolonged global war. Resources were concentrated on campaigns against the Soviet Union and Britain, while defenses in the West were underdeveloped. The Atlantic Wall, though formidable on paper, lacked sufficient manpower, fuel reserves, and mobile armored units to respond effectively once the Allies landed. Industrial planning reflected the same misjudgment. Germany focused on producing advanced but complex weapons in limited numbers, expecting quality to compensate for quantity. Meanwhile, the United States built standardized equipment designed for rapid mass production and easy repair. This imbalance meant that German losses, whether tanks, aircraft, or trained crews, became increasingly difficult to replace, while American forces grew stronger with each passing month. The underestimation also affected air and naval strategy. Germany failed to commit fully to disrupting American logistics early enough, allowing U.S. shipbuilding and convoy systems to mature. By the time German commanders recognized the scale of American production, Allied control of the air and sea made meaningful disruption nearly impossible. These strategic errors compounded over time. Each decision based on flawed assumptions narrowed Germany's options and accelerated its decline. Misjudging America was not a single mistake. It was a chain of interconnected failures that left Germany fighting a war of attrition it could never hope to win. The story of Germany's misjudgment of America offers one of the clearest lessons of World War II. Never underestimate a nation based solely on appearances. From the earliest years of the conflict, German leaders evaluated the United States as a distant, indulgent society, ill-prepared for the hardships of modern warfare. They saw wealth as weakness, democracy as indecision, and comfort as fragility. Yet, as the war unfolded, reality proved the opposite. American society, far from collapsing under the demands of war, transformed into an industrial and military powerhouse. Factories churned out tanks, aircraft, and ships at unprecedented rates. Soldiers, initially inexperienced, were trained, equipped, and rapidly hardened by combat. Logistic systems ensured troops were fed, supplied, and reinforced, even across oceans. German commanders who had relied on outdated assumptions were forced to confront a reality that far exceeded their predictions. The consequences were profound. By the time Germany recognized the scale of America's power, it was too late. Strategic errors, misallocated resources, and repeated battlefield setbacks accelerated the collapse of the Third Reich. The war demonstrated that military might, industrial capacity, and societal resilience could not be judged by superficial impressions. This lesson resonated beyond 1945. Historians, military planners, and policymakers have since cited the German underestimation of America as a cautionary tale. True strength lies not only in numbers or technology, but in the ability of a society to adapt, endure, and mobilize in ways an opponent may not foresee. For Germany, the misjudgment was catastrophic. For the world, it became a reminder that appearances can be deceiving and that assumptions without evidence can have devastating consequences. In the early years of World War II, Germany did not see the United States as a true military threat. To Adolf Hitler and much of the German high command, America was a nation of factories, banks, and politicians, not hardened soldiers. German intelligence reports from the late 1930s often described the U.S. Army as small, inexperienced, and poorly prepared for a modern European war. Compared to the battle-tested Wehrmacht, America appeared distant and naive. Nazi leadership believed that American society was too divided and too comfortable to endure the sacrifices of total war. The memory of World War I reinforced this belief. In German eyes, the United States had arrived late, fought briefly, and then withdrawn back across the Atlantic. Hitler himself reportedly viewed Americans as materialistic and undisciplined, more interested in consumer goods than combat. He assumed that democratic politics would slow decision-making and weaken military resolve. German diplomats and military observers also underestimated America's willingness to mobilize. In 1939, the U.S. Army ranked far behind those of Germany, Britain, and the Soviet Union in size. German analysts focused on this number, ignoring America's vast reserve of manpower and industrial capacity. They mistook lack of preparation for lack of potential. When the war began in Europe, Germany's attention remained fixed on Britain and the Soviet Union. The Atlantic Ocean was seen as a natural barrier, protecting Germany from direct American intervention. Even after the U.S. began supplying weapons to the Allies, German leaders convinced themselves that America was merely an arsenal, not a warrior. This first impression would prove to be one of Germany's greatest strategic miscalculations. What they saw as weakness was only the calm before a massive and unstoppable mobilization, one that would soon reshape the course of the war. During the early years of World War II, Nazi propaganda promoted a powerful and misleading image of American society. German newspapers, radio broadcasts, and internal military briefings repeatedly portrayed Americans as spoiled by comfort, wealth, and modern conveniences. According to this view, a population raised on consumer goods, automobiles, and entertainment could not possibly endure the discipline and hardship of total war. The idea of the soft American became a convenient myth within the Third Reich. German officials contrasted American life with their own militarized culture. While German youth were trained from an early age in obedience and physical endurance, Americans were depicted as individualistic and undisciplined. Propaganda films mocked U.S. soldiers as poorly trained men who relied on technology rather than courage. Jazz music, Hollywood films, and advertising were cited as proof that American culture lacked seriousness and moral strength. This belief influenced military expectations. German commanders assumed that American troops would collapse under heavy casualties or prolonged fighting. Reports from early encounters in North Africa were initially dismissed or explained away as British-led operations. When American units made mistakes, as all inexperienced armies do, German observers used them as confirmation of their prejudice, rather than evidence of a learning force. Yet the myth ignored uncomfortable facts. American training programs expanded rapidly, discipline tightened, and battlefield experience hardened U.S. troops with remarkable speed. By 1943, German soldiers in Italy and later in France began reporting that Americans fought stubbornly, advanced relentlessly, and quickly replaced losses. These reports clashed with years of propaganda and were often suppressed or downplayed.